Hello, happy Monday, and welcome to our first Inspiroz Innovation Day webinar on a topic we're calling Back to the Future of School. My name is Lars Beck, and I'm the president and co-founder of Inspiroz. As a former Charter Network founder and CEO, I can imagine how challenging, how frustrating, and how time-consuming these times are for you and your schools. We hope that today's webinar will be energizing and that you will walk away with nuggets of new knowledge you can use, new relationships you can lean on and learn from, and hopefully some renewed optimism as well. Thank you for joining us. Inspiroz provides IT and technology support to approximately 125 charter schools around the country. Our primary focus is on being a charter school's outsourced IT team. We support infrastructure, we provide help desk support to teachers and leaders, and sometimes now directly to students and families as well, as you can imagine. And we serve as a school's virtual CIO or CTO, and we lead and support strategic planning around technology. We've also started working with schools around data warehousing, visualization, and dashboard creation. We think we're unique in that we embrace our support, including education technology. As you can imagine, this specific work around ed tech and instructional tech has never been more important or impactful to our school partners. We are a mission-focused organization, and as such, we care deeply about the outcomes each of you are working towards every day. And that's why we created these Inspiroz Innovation Days. Our Inspiroz Innovation Days are designed to be engaging and collaborative discussions for charter school IT and operations leaders, centered on current topics intersecting technology and education. Before I introduce our panelists and our moderator, I want to share two quick housekeeping notes. One, we are recording this Innovation Day webinar so that we can share it with our school partners and with other schools who couldn't join us today. And two, we hope the session will be interactive. We will start with a moderated discussion with our three panelists. During this time, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen if you want to ask a question. When appropriate, we'll share the question with the panel, but we'll also leave time at the end for live Q&A, as well as a review of the questions we didn't get to during the discussion. Now let's get started. Today's topic has two parts. First, a review of how schools are supporting teaching and learning through technology during this COVID pandemic. How are things going with remote learning and hybrid learning? What's working well? What's been especially difficult? And where might we want to do over? And two, a look ahead. It may feel a little early, but we think it's critical that school leadership teams begin thinking about what have we started doing during this pandemic that should stick around when school returns to normal. I'm thrilled that we have three great school leaders from three great school networks as panelists today, and they'll be joining me on camera now. Kofi Osei is the Senior Director of Data and Information Systems at Democracy Prep Public Schools. Ernie Torres is the Director of Technology for KIPP Metro Atlantic Public Schools. And Michelle Serwin is the Chief Operating Officer for the Public Prep Network. Welcome, Kofi, Ernie, and Michelle, and thank you for joining us today. Moderating our discussion will be my colleague, Matthew Pesquet, who leads Inspiroz's work around instructional technology. Prior to that, he spent 10 years leading operations, innovation, IT, and ed tech for KIPP SoCal, which was formerly KIPP LA, a network of 20 schools in California. I hope everybody has a great time today. Matthew, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lars. Thanks for the great introduction and for getting our Innovation Day off to a great start. And thank you so much to our panelists as well for joining us as well. I share in Lars's gratitude to all of you. I'm very excited to see so many attendees also joining us as well. And I know we're going to have a great hour of learning together ahead of us. So to get us started right off, I'm going to hand our panelists a bit of a softball to get us rolling, but it's a lightning round softball. So I'm going to ask in order, Michelle, for you to go first. So Michelle, and then Ernie, and then Kofi. And we've got a handful of questions for you. So just to set a baseline for everyone, if you could share the number of schools in your network, the grades that you serve, the number of students that you serve, your locations, if you currently have students in school, and then something that is unique about your school or context. So Michelle, please kick us off. Thanks.
Thanks, Matthew, and thank you, Inspiroz, for organizing this day. I think my favorite part of being involved in the charter sector is the collaborative nature and learning from one another. So perfect opportunity to do that, and hopefully I can impart some piece of wisdom on the group. So I am the COO of Public Prep. We are the first single-sex public charter school network. We have schools in the Lower East Side and the Bronx. So we have girls prep and boys prep schools and pre-prep. So something that sets us apart is being a single-sex charter, and also one of the few charters that has UPK programs as well. So we have 2,200 students that we're serving across, like I said, Lower East Side and the Bronx, across 5 campuses, predominantly in co-located DOE spaces, but one private facility that my office is in, the Boys Prep. And up until Friday, we had been in person with 800 plus students doing both parents had a choice to pick a remote or a hybrid 4 days a week. So now with the craziness of what's going on in New York, we have to take a pause and look at those metrics. So it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful to have students in our building. So now we're just on a pause and we hope to have them back very shortly.
Thank you, Michelle. Great modeling. Excellent. What's was it UPK or UTK? Is that universal?
Yeah,
TK?
UPK, universal pre-K. So
Great.
4-year-olds, not 3-year-olds yet, but we have 4-year-olds. So we have one of the largest charter nursery programs in New York City.
Amazing. Early childhood is where it's at for sure. All right. Next, let's go to Kofi, please.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone.
Oh.
Great to, or did you want to talk to?
I'm sorry, I messed up. Yeah, I said Ernie in my pre-thing. So Ernie, let's stick with our order. I apologize.
No problem. Thank you for having me. As Director of Technology, I serve 5,100 scholars in grades kindergarten through college. We're currently virtual since the beginning of our school year in August. And yeah, and we have 11 locations throughout the Atlanta metro area.
And Ernie, what would you say, what's a unique or context about KIPP Metro Atlanta schools?
I would say the KIPP through college program that we support our scholars from kindergarten all the way to their college experience, making sure that we can address and work with them and their families to address any barriers that may prevent them from being successful in college.
Great, I love it. So Michelle, we got the focus on like early childhood there, and then Ernie like all the way to and through. I love it. Kofi.
Hey everyone, thanks for the introduction, Matthew. My name is Kofi Osei. I'm currently the Senior Director of Information Systems for Democracy Prep. We are a 21 school charter network that serves the K through 12 grade bands. We have approximately 7,000 scholars that we serve across 5 regions in New York, New Jersey, Louisiana, Nevada, and Texas. We do at this time have in some of our regions, including New York region, which is where the majority of our scholars are, have the option and opportunity for scholars to come in for in-person learning. 2 days a week is kind of the hybrid model that we've chosen. And right now, as Michelle mentioned, like we are certainly monitoring kind of the circumstances on the ground to determine when and if it might make sense for us to adapt our strategy there. One thing that I would certainly call out about Democracy Prep that I think is unique and interesting is that we have a pretty deep commitment to civics, both in terms of civic education as well as civic engagement of our scholars themselves. So civics is built into the graduation requirements that we have. It's built into the identity that we've created for ourselves as a network. And we really, I think, do a great job of trying to ensure that our scholars are actively engaged, not just learning about institutions, but also like participating in the sorts of things that they care about that are happening every day and that affect themselves and their communities.
That's great. Thank you so much, everyone. So as you all can tell, we've got a great set of panelists here that represent a wide variety of schools and of different contexts who are approaching and dealing with the situations at hand in different innovative ways. And so I'm excited to give them the opportunity to share with all of you their learnings and insights. So we're gonna dive right into the first part. Lars framed our topic for us of kind of looking at what we're doing right now, and then looking into the future. And so as we look at what we're doing right now, we're actually looking at a couple of questions around distance learning, our distance learning rollout. And so I want to ask the panelists, and Michelle, I'm going to start with you. as you think about your the rollout of distance learning and that shift, and I know it was a long time ago, right? And we've been through so much since then. But as you kind of can reflect back at that time, what are, you know, the best decisions that you and your team made when you were rolling out distance learning?
Sure. You're going to let someone else go first with one of these questions, right, Matthew? Okay.
Yes.
I'll take this one though. So I would distinctly recall walking on a weekend and getting a call from a board member, and basically he said, "Never waste a good crisis." Like, okay. So I took that in and called our director of technology on Monday, and we quickly decided that we needed to get developmentally appropriate technology into the hands of our youngest scholars. Technology devices were really not used as much in our organization anyway at the like K through 2 level. They were used for map and step testing. At home, they had access to different ed tech tools. But to make this work, we needed to get devices, not only devices that were developmentally appropriate, meaning we chose tablets that had a stylus. These young scholars are still developing motor skills. They needed a way to submit work that they can do very easily without, keyboard typing, which is really not where their learning is at. So we were able to not only get very quickly find these with the help of Inspiroz, these appropriate devices, and logistically prepare to get them in the hands of our scholars, having to drop ship them to 400 plus individual addresses. So it was really swiftly moving to get developmentally appropriate technology into the hands of those scholars and the tools. So we also used Kami. So they had to be able to edit those PDFs and submit their homework. And there's a lot of great functionality that teachers were so creative in using to make sure our youngest scholars were able to participate in remote learning, and also got us closer to our one-to-one goal, which we had set for this upcoming school year, but had to quickly move to that due to the pandemic. We also then we leased these devices, which would help preserve cash. So not only do we have to think about technology, we have to think about cash. So for the first time, we leased those devices. So once we had that, we only use Google Classroom in our middle school, so we quickly had to implement that. So once you have the device, we'll get to internet connectivity later on in this conversation. You have the device, but you really had to have the tools for the teachers to have that hub to create content and for our scholars to commit. So never waste a good crisis and keep things moving forward.
Great. So I heard like making decisions, thinking about accessibility for your youngest students and scholars, thinking about budget and risk management, thinking about moving forward. Yep, across the board. Great. Kofi or Ernie, would either of you guys like to jump in and add anything to that in terms of like some best decisions you guys made that really stick out, or your team?
Well, there were two decisions that we made that impacted our ability to pivot virtually. One was that we implemented Zendesk Talk, and that was as an effort to support our families remotely. Families were probably not exposed to supporting their scholars at home technically with connecting to Zoom or their Wi-Fi. Or using
Can you
Google
clarify real quick, Ernie, what is Zendesk Talk? What does that mean?
Zendesk Talk is the ability for families to request technical support either by phone or through a link on our website. They can request support to a form, and they could determine whether it's connectivity or Chromebook repairs or really just anything. When we started, it was mostly anything that they needed at home to support their scholars. And then we learned, we were able to learn better what they really needed and focused our attentions on those. So we implemented Zendesk Talk to support our families remotely as they supported their scholars. And the second thing was that we ordered Chromebooks early in the pandemic. There seemed to be a shortage immediately after, and we were able to have enough Chromebooks because we weren't one-to-one before the pandemic. So it was important for us now as we pivoted to virtual instruction for the whole region that we were one-to-one. And like Michelle, we also wanted to make sure that we had the right technology for our scholars. We're standardized on using touch technology, touch Chromebooks for our K and 1 scholars. And we were able to do that from the beginning of our school year, and we thought that was critical to the success of the virtual pivot.
That's great. Thanks for echoing that, Ernie. Kofi.
Yeah, so I think there's two things that stood out to me as I reflected on it, decisions that I really feel like helped us achieve some success as part of this transition to distance learning. One of them was, from my standpoint, the decision that our organization made to get input and feedback early from our scholars and families about what their needs and preferences were about how distance learning should work and function. Very early on in the process, before we really made any major decisions, I think we really kind of we're able to benefit from kind of sending out surveys, asking folks kind of basic questions to say, what are your barriers right now to being able to kind of do virtual learning? How interested are you in having your scholar come into the building as part of, an essential part of their learning experience? What are some things that you're concerned about? What are the things that you expect from us? Versus things that you would just kind of like find helpful, but don't necessarily expect us to kind of step in and play that role. So getting, and these are questions that we really sent out to all our families. So getting that information back and really seeing and getting a clear sense of what the landscape was in terms of what the needs were and what the expectations were, I think really shaped for us what our priorities should be in terms of where we really needed to kind of make decisions quick and early and make sure we're getting them right. And in other areas where we felt pretty confident that families would be able to kind of take, meet us halfway and make sure that everyone was kind of doing their part to make this educational shift a successful one. So that's one that I think was really important, and we've continued even after virtual learning started to continue to send requests for feedback and kind of observe changes in attitudes, changes in needs, and make, thought about what our priorities should be as a technology team based on kind of some of that information. So I think that was a really important part of what made it successful for us, or as successful as it was, transitioning to distance learning. The other thing that I would say was a good decision on our part was to not necessarily have a limitations-oriented approach to what our role should be in supporting families, right? We kind of said, okay, like, let's forget about all the constraints that we have. Let's just ask the question, what do you need? And not really stop or limit ourselves in kind of where we will adapt to try and kind of get around those challenges, right? And so, obviously we have scholars that need learning devices, but you also have scholars that need internet access at home, or they have it and it's not really reliable. Or they need, guidance about where they can get low-cost internet access for themselves and their family. Or they need
the list goes on, right? Yeah.
Right. The information about, well, where can I go if my home is not a great place for me to be focused? All these sorts of things where we were pretty open-minded about what our role was to make sure that we were providing the services that the
really
needed.
Put on that growth mindset and find a way to yes, right? I've seen a lot of folks finding a way to yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other benefit of that as well, both with the input and kind of the full service approach, I think that it led to a bit of a investment from the families, to also kind of make the effort to make the system work, right? If they saw that if they saw that they were participating in decisions that we were making, if they saw that we were kind of not really, saying no, then it kind of put them in a position where they couldn't really say, they couldn't have a reason to not really meet us halfway in kind of making the system work. So I think those are some of the two of the big decisions that I felt like really helped us along the way.
Those are great. Thank you all for sharing those. Kofi, we're going to stick with you, but before I move on, I just want to take a moment to have ask all the attendees. It's been a long haul, and it's important to reflect back and think about what are the wins that we've had. What are those things? And so I encourage you all in your moments of reflection sometime to think back over the last few months and identify where those good moments were, because I'm sure there's been a lot for everybody amidst all the other things going on. So Kofi, sticking with you and kind of turning the tables a little bit, what are the biggest challenges that you're still facing? So what haven't you been able to solve yet?
Yeah, so Ernie actually touched on this, and it's one of the things that they were able to do well. I think one of the big challenges for sure that we deal with on an almost constant basis is just this limited access to the technology that we need. The inventory really is hard to come by right now. You can't get it as quickly as you need it. You really have to be thinking months in advance and really projecting at this point to be able to be equipped with what you need to meet scholars, where they stand. So that's one where it's kind of hard to know exactly how much we can impact that reality. It's a reality that's really pretty universal right now. But I would say that is one of the ones where we get the most frustrated, because even though we did take steps to purchase a lot in advance, right, the need ended up being a lot greater then we had time to measure before we made certain decisions, right? And so right now we're kind of having to now understand a little bit like what scarcity means. We're having to make certain decisions based on that scarcity and understand a little bit like we can't just go and get what we want whenever we want it when it comes to some of these technology assets. So I think that's one of the biggest ones that stands out for me and my team right now as a challenge that continues and where it's not really clear when that will abate.
Thanks. Ernie, shifting back to you, besides just procurement and the flow challenges, what are some other challenges you guys are still facing, working through?
Internet connectivity, stable internet connectivity. We too, surveyed our families to determine what their needs were at home. And while we were able to provide hotspots to families and also provide information of services that were being provided by other companies for either low cost or free for internet, the stability of that internet connectivity it seems to still be lacking, and that impacts our scholars to connect to their classrooms every day. Or sometimes it's the use. They may have a lot of windows open, or they're using equipment dynamically that's just not just focused for their school days, and that impacts whether it's the video or the sound. So we're still challenged in working with our families, making sure that they have a stable connectivity.
So continued access, right? So devices, internet connectivity, support for those devices and that internet connectivity, like all of those things have to go together. Michelle, are you having a different challenges?
Sure, some of the same, but I'll add on, I would say it's a lot of change management. There's a lot of change put on, not only our families, but our teachers in implementing new tools and technology. So I think the knee-jerk reaction is email IT support or email our director of technology, where I have a new hashtag, we're all it, we are all IT. So we need to really double down on professional development and education of our families and education of our teachers, so they feel empowered and confident that they know how to use these tools, and that if an extra window pops open, they don't need to email IT support. They really can solve it themselves. So just the amount of change, the change management, and doubling down on professional development for both our families and our teachers through this change. I will add on the frustration with internet connectivity is one on, I almost feel as though I want to, if somehow we can get on the federal agenda between the US DOE and the FCC to make internet connectivity part of E-rate. If anyone's interested, DM me after this, because I just feel like internet connectivity, particularly for vulnerable populations, should really be a human right at this juncture.
Yeah, amen to that. I'm sure everyone on this call echoes that. Ernie, thinking about, so we're going to shift gears and thinking about this access equity question, right? You guys have we've touched on it here and there, but let's dive right into it. So in order to, I think, help the attendees, I'd like to ask you to be as specific as possible. What additional technology, ed tech tools, services, applications have you provided to teachers and students to use at home as part of your response to distance learning? So Ernie, if you could just, go through the list, and if you want to go slow, that's great, because I'm sure people will want to take notes.
Well, for our teachers, we provide laptop and cell phones that also have a hotspot ability with unlimited data. We also, for teachers, we provided monitors, school supplies, document cameras, any school supply that they felt that they needed, so that they can then bring that virtual, translate that into a virtual experience for them at home, because most of our teachers are still at home. For scholars, we also, obviously, in addition to the Chromebook, we also provided hotspots and other opportunities for low cost or free internet connectivity there. But for the teachers, we try to mirror the entire classroom experience for them at home. And whether if it was a chair, it was a monitor, or dual monitors, whatever they felt that they needed to translate that experience into a virtual, in a virtual way to their scholars. Because teachers, we had 2 weeks to pivot from in-classroom instruction to virtual, so we wanted to make sure that that transition was one that we will meet the teachers where they are, given that they also had different technical expertise at the same time.
Did you, in order to distribute the classroom type technology, like the document cameras, did you pull those from existing classrooms, or did you purchase new ones and ship them to your teachers so that they have additional ones at home?
We did both, because there were some teachers that preferred to come into our schools to teach, to provide a virtual experience for their scholars, and some teachers did it at home. Not all of our teachers lived in the Atlanta metro area. Some of them lived outside of the Atlanta metro area, and they prefer to teach at home. So we purchased some document cameras that they can take with them at home or have them delivered at home in this COVID world. And some we use from our classrooms that we already had.
Great, thanks for clarifying. Michelle, we'll go back to you for this one. So are you providing technologies for teachers and students at home? And if so, what, and how are you doing that?
Yeah, so I think we focus more, right or wrong, probably wrong at this point, we should have done both, but really focus on our scholars first and what their needs are. And even now thinking, wow, we really should have given them headphones, and really thinking of what else, how do we improve upon what we were doing? I think everyone was just trying to get through that moment, and now just thinking through what else do our students need. We already talked about connectivity. We do have a majority of our teachers were coming in person, and even if they were doing blended learning, some remote, they're predominantly here. So we didn't go that extra mile, which I do believe we now need to do, which providing that extra monitor, whether it's a green screen behind it so they can create great backgrounds for their classes and be really creative, or that extra light. So now in the East Coast, it's getting dark at, before school is over. So I think we now are looking to what is next to make the teachers have a better remote learning environment, create a better remote learning environment for themselves, which obviously then impacts our scholars. So I think we have a little more work to do on that front. We are on back order with Swivel. We're looking forward to kind of testing Swivel in our classrooms in January, really from a coaching perspective. For social distances, you really can't have the coaches and the academic directors in your classrooms looking over the shoulders. That's just not what's going to happen today. So we hope to use Swivel for that. In addition, if there's an in-person student who needs to all of a sudden be remote, we want to make sure the teachers have that ability. So stay tuned. I can't tell you how that's going to work, but we're really excited on implementing that in January with Inspiroz.
It's great. Kofi, I saw a lot of nodding of your head in agreement there. Anything you want to add to that in terms of the technology?
Yeah, so I think definitely on the hardware side, very much would echo kind of what's already been mentioned, the laptops, the Chromebooks for sure, the hotspots. Headsets is something that we did also get for teachers, and the headphones is something that kind of late in the game we realized we should have these as well, and so we got some of those. I think one of the things that I would also highlight in terms of how we've used tools is on the software side too. So we had existing software tools that were already in use as kind of like features or kind of trinkets, let's say, that our teachers could leverage kind of as needed. But now they really became kind of central pillars of how the education needed to work. And so some of the software we're talking about, obviously you have the video platform. We were able to kind of procure an upgraded version of Zoom that kind of got rid of obviously like the meeting limitations and allowed for some of the features that allow for a little bit more of a dynamic classroom session. Some of the other tools that we have, one of them that I think has really made a big difference and has become much more important is a tool we use called Clever. It's a single sign-on authentication platform, and what that really means is that it's a one-stop shop where anyone in our digital environment can just sign in one place and get access to all the digital tools and accounts and appropriate credentials for everything that we have access to as a network, right? And so if you're a student, you just log in and you go into Clever, and then Clever just kind of authenticates you into Zoom, authenticates you into your learning management system, authenticates you into everything that you need, and you can just kind of click on the icon, and that really reduces the complexity of starting class and maneuvering the tools that are now being utilized for class. We've also got Go Guardian, one of the tools that we use largely for digital monitoring, right? So that we can see what scholars are doing on their devices if they're using our devices. And we can also kind of use that as a way to have teachers have a little bit more visibility, ensure that scholars are engaged with the coursework, ensure that scholars are engaging with appropriate content while in class, kind of set some parameters around what does happen in the digital space when class is in session. So those are some of the things that we had access to before, but again, they weren't really as central. And now that we're in this digital space, they've become really key elements of how we maintain kind of structure in the digital space.
Imagine you're not alone in that. I really appreciate you also, Kofi, bringing us back to the software and applications piece, right? Because at the end of the day, all the technology and the internet access doesn't really do much without great applications that support teaching and amplify teaching and learning, right? So I do want to circle back, Michelle. I saw you unmute yourself, so why don't you? I'd love to hear Michelle and Ernie just adding specifically on the software front. What are some of those key tools that you are using?
I was going to echo the reason I unmuted myself was just add on to what Kofi said about Clever. Our director of technology is a big fan of that, just for many reasons, but the authentication and making it easier for parents and for everything to be in one place, that it's almost now a top criteria when we're evaluating any ed tech tool. If it is not compatible or integrated with Clever, we really ask our academic team to have a very compelling reason why it should be added to our suite. Not saying we're 100% compliant, but it's a really big, important piece of it. So therefore, all of the ed tech tools that are touching our families should be going through Clever. We now can text message the badges to your families. We had tech pickup, and some schools are very creative in creating laminated sheets with their badges, because that's really how the kids used to do it in the classroom. So the ed tech tools and Clever was a big part of that. I'll also say now we're really looking at utilization. We made a lot of investment in ed tech tools and other platforms, but now you have to say, okay, are these working? Are they being utilized? What is the cost per student? What is the cost per minute? And is this the way forward? So we definitely on the ed tech side, we also use GoGuardian and Gaggle for both email and kind of internet uses, which does create an interesting level of additional support needed on site for our student and family affairs and creating processes to kind of manage what we are in fact seeing. And then I would say with Google Classroom, I think it would have been considered an LMS light prior to now. So now I think Google Classroom is getting a little bit more respect, and we're saying, where do we take Google Classroom? How do we use formative in conjunction with Google Classroom? How are we going to take data out of Google Classroom? Lars mentioned Inspiroz working on data warehouse projects. We're one of the clients that they're working on that. We're figuring out a way, how are we extracting the Google Classroom data with Illuminate, with other information from PowerSchool to really triangulate data and understand kind of assessment and progress for our scholars. So it's kind of taking the basis of what we have and how do you build on that and integrate, really understand your ecosystem and understand the systems that need to integrate and the data that we need to be looking at to understand the progress of our students.
Thank you, Michelle. Ernie, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on really quick that we were using Clever before the pandemic, so we continue to leverage Clever as an ease of use way for our scholars to connect. We also use Google Classroom, but we added securely. We thought about GoGuardian, but we chose securely for, as a product that will fit for our scholar monitoring and engagement and content filtering as well from home. And we also added on securely 24 to monitor scholar communication even when we're not in a classroom setting. We thought that's a lot of data that helps us understand what scholars are doing and when they're doing it, and it helps us better understand how engaged they are in the process in the virtual world.
We could probably do a whole innovation day on the decision making between GoGuardian and Securely and Lightspeed for people who are in the room, but I don't want to take us too far off on a tangent. I've got actually a great follow-up question from Alicia in our Q&A. In terms of, Michelle, you touched on this in terms of the change management and this need to think more holistically about what we're doing and what we're implementing. And so one of the questions here, I'm just going to read it verbatim. Given the lessons learned, what steps are being taken to standardize the instructional technology so that there are core systemic programs and limited apps for math, social studies, science, etc., to prevent burnout? We call this our churn, right? This churn, and we see this with students, with teachers, right? You roll out these programs, you spend weeks learning about them, and then next semester that program is gone and there's a new one in its place, and the teachers and the students lose faith and engagement in that. How are any of you thinking about that?
I alluded to it at first was we worked, even pre-pandemic, this was something that we wanted to implement last summer, working in conjunction with our academic team at our home office, the CMO level, is what is the criteria set for which a new ed tech tool was going to be added to our suite? First of all, is it aligned to the curriculum? Does it work with Clever, or now can it be integrated with Google Classroom? Is it adaptive? Adaptive learning is probably best for the students. So we kind of put together 5 or 6 points. So when someone wanted to bring a new ed tech up, we say, okay, run it through the criteria set. does it meet that? And then of course, cost per student, et cetera. And so there's other technical aspects as well, but just the idea of creating a criteria set before anyone comes to you, run it through the criteria set, let them justify it, and then make decisions. And also, if we're going to add, should we subtract? If we're adding, is there anything we should be subtracting?
Right.
Or is this truly additive, something we've never had before? So kind of going through a decision tree and a matrix first, and then making the decisions. And we're doing that now as we start planning for 21-22.
To your last point, do you have a hard cap on any like total number of applications or curricular applications, like that we're not going to have more than 3 math applications for this grade band?
Well, Matthew, I may have one, but I need to get everyone kind of like, on board to have that. So we're negotiating.
Kofi
that.
or Ernie, anything in your any kind of like hard limits or anything you've established along these lines?
Well, we were already using much of the same software that we're using now in the classroom. It was our greatest lift was just, translating that into a virtual realm where we will also make sure, because the scholars are not in the classroom. We wanted to make sure that there was engagement, there was retention and joy, in a virtual classroom for our scholars.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say there's any hard and fast limits that we set at the network level when it comes to standardization or when it comes to kind of software platforms, but we definitely do review and kind of sometimes have conversations with our schools about what they're using and what decisions and what's driving the decision to keep versus replace certain software. And we definitely, I think part of that is also so that we can, because the schools right now, the way that we set up, have a bit of autonomy about what tools they want to use digitally and that they feel are most effective for their students. We want to make sure that if things are working really, really well, that information is kind of being shared, right? And so like if the school has a really positive experience, but they're the only ones that happen to be using something, we kind of want to understand that, make sure that if it makes sense for us to play a role in other folks understanding kind of why this is better or why it might make sense to kind of either explore different options or stay with what they have, that we have that information. But I wouldn't say that there's any sort of rules that we've set around like a limit on that sort of, I think it's an interesting question because I think there's a little bit of a tension between, the benefits of having a broad library of tools that for some folks is enabling versus potentially just having something that is a little bit difficult to navigate and that creates a lack of structure and consistency and manageability. Like if it becomes a little bit too spread and a little bit too varied across schools. So it's a little bit of a kind of a balancing act there. I think that's one that we often let our principals kind of engage with and talk to each other and figure out kind of how to make those sorts of decisions and where to draw those lines. But I do think that it's definitely a balance.
Yeah, it sure is. And there's also different types, right? We all know there's different buckets and types of software, right? There's instructional content, curricular software. There's things like GoGuardian or Securely and other types of teaching tools. And so having a clear, direction setting for your schools and your teams around, how your decision making in those different buckets. It was always my personal belief that schools should really have no more than 2 core curricular apps per content strand per grade band of students. So like your K through 4, ELA, you should have no more than 2 core programs that you're focusing on over a pretty good period of time and being very intentional when you're changing those out.
I'm going to get that snippet on the recording of that, Matthew, and use that in one of my next meeting, if that's okay with you.
Of course. And then beyond that, right, like all these accoutrements, all these additional tools that teachers and students use are extremely valuable. Yeah. All right, we're gonna shift back. So thinking now back to in school, right? As you're thinking back to students and teachers coming back to teaching in school and teaching both, right, students that are in front of them, as well as continuing to teach students that are learning at a distance. What additional technology, hardware tools are you thinking about in your classrooms? And also thinking about how are you maybe differently arranging your classrooms, not necessarily for distance learning, but for socially distancing, but for supporting the technology that students are now going to have, right? How are you thinking about where you're placing charging strips or extension cords, and what direction are you giving to teachers as they're thinking about setting up their rooms to support students in their classrooms, as well as still be able to teach to students that are outside of their classrooms? Kofi.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that what you mentioned here about kind of the room setup and equipping them, I think I would say our biggest challenge, because most of the tools that we were acquiring for students and teachers were deliberately intended to be kind of mobile, right? So you can use them in school, you can use them at home. But I think the biggest challenge that we had in school specifically was, how do we set it up so that a person can be kind of continually productive, continually engaged without having to worry about taking care, charging their equipment, moving their equipment, or anything else that might disrupt kind of like a steady flow of instructional time. So I think two things. One, yes, for sure. I think the room setup piece, trial and error for sure. It wasn't really a one size fit all sort of setup. We had to kind of figure out what equipment was necessary in terms of the charges, in terms of how to make that safe. Just maybe like some broad parameters around advice about how to set up a room. But again, given just kind of the variability of where doors are and how much space there is in a room, we had to allow some of our operations teams to get creative with how to actually use that equipment to set up such that folks could stay and not have to worry about their Chromebooks, for example, depleting. I think the other part of that was also a little bit related, is the way that we decided to adapt our in-school class structure to make that less of a challenge, right? And so we decided to apply cohorts to a much broader range of grade bands than are typically the case, because in a cohort model, essentially we were saying, how do we set it up so that as many scholars can essentially be stationary and not have to move around between rooms as part of their instruction as possible, especially since it's less necessary now, given that a lot of the instruction is virtual. So we've done a lot of that work for safety reasons, but then also to make it easier for us to set up rooms in such a way that they could really become like learning stations, let's say. And we could get rid of some of the variables that otherwise we'd have to solve for. Right. If we were trying to mimic some of the aspects of kind of a conventional school.
Very like strategic, creative thinking there for sure. Like thinking about that schedule and cohort. Ernie, as you think about coming back into school, what like additional technologies are you looking at for supporting your teachers and students in their classrooms?
Well, we believe that we're going to continue to use Chromebooks in the classroom, and we're going to learn a couple of things in terms of how to keep our equipment charged. We have Chromebook carts in every classroom, but we kind of strip those in removing the adapters to provide Chromebooks at home. So I'm looking at there's a number of strips that are magnetic, so that if you touch them, you won't get electrocuted, for example. And we can run those to the middle of the classroom and just change. That connects to a hub, and then you can just change the adapter to the hub based on the Chromebook adapter that they may need. So that's a consideration. That
sounds cool. So like a universal Chromebook charger. That's great. Right.
Exactly. And then that way, that allows us to just run it through the middle of the classroom and just span out without having a lot of cabling or wiring. Super. Or having safety concern. And then there's another model that I'm evaluating that is battery operated. It's almost like those portable drills that you can charge them and then use them portably. So you have a battery that you can that a Chromebook could just connect to, to any Chromebook, and you just clamp it onto the desk. So if some scholars need it, need to, charge their device, we just clamp it onto their desk. They'll plug it in with their own adapter, and that'll charge up to 2 devices at a time. And then, figure out some algorithm like at lunchtime, charge all the, make sure everybody charges the machines at lunch, and setting up some, reusing our Chromebooks carts for that purpose. And hopefully that'll allow us to.
That's awesome. I love that, like the rechargeable battery idea. That's such a great idea to have like a stack of those universal like rechargeable batteries that you can charge up, overnight or wherever, and then kids could just carry those around with them. That's a great idea. Or like you said, you could have them in strategic locations. What a great idea.
Those are low cost. They charge 2 Chromebooks, up to 2 Chromebooks, and they're about like a little bit less than $100. So that makes it a viable solution to have over a number.
That's great. I want to keep, thanks Ernie so much for sharing. I want to keep us moving forward. Does anybody have like any like super amazing technology for back in school that you really are dying to share and make sure everybody knows about? All right, super. So as we move right to the future, this is like the crux of the question. And we think about all of these innovations and adaptations that we've made to support distance learning and hybrid learning. We think about this increased appetite or tolerance, at least, for technology being infused into teaching and learning, and now this real desire and need and thirst for more for technology to support that. What are, as we think about those, those adaptations that we've made, what are some of those critical practices that we need to hang on to as teachers and instructors as we move back to in-school learning? Michelle, let's start with you for this one.
Sure. Matthew, you know that at Public Prep, we've been talking about digital transformation for 18 months. So it wasn't just pandemic. And because we had an opportunity to think about that, we started walking through top to bottom, side to side. How do you stand up digital transformation across your organization? So things like, and what the pandemic allowed us to do is accelerate some of this, maybe unplanned, but that's kind of the silver lining. So we were still printing report cards for elementary school. I don't think we're going to be doing that anymore. We didn't have one-to-one devices. We will have one-to-one devices going forward. Our family engagement was okay, but giving the families the ability to have town halls, whether campus-based or network-based via Zoom, the engagement has gone up. We have no intention of turning back on that. So I would say turn up the volume on digitization and digital transformation and don't turn back.
I love that family engagement piece that you kind of closed with. I think that's, such a piece that in my conversations with folks, is not something that really gets surfaced and named that much. The increased family engagement that we've seen out of this. Kofi, how would you answer this?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things for sure that I've seen happen because of the shift into digital learning that hopefully we can maintain. I think one of them that definitely stands out to me is just the emphasis on the readiness and the preparedness of scholars and their setup at home for digital learning, right? So I think out of necessity, we became really, really interested in outside of school, kind of what is the readiness, the preparedness, the access that these families have, because it's essential, right? But obviously, I think even when we come back to school, I think it's still going to be very important for us to have a deep understanding of what the capabilities are of families outside of the school to engage with content, to explore content, to connect with their peers, to connect with their academics, to kind of do that in interesting and engaging ways. Without limitation, right? And for us to still have some amount of commitment to saying, we're going to support you at home, even if it's not essential for you to be in class, with what you need to kind of maximize your educational experience. So I think that's something that I hope will kind of remain a little bit of an ethos of how schools think about what their role is with the scholars that they serve. And I think another thing that I have seen that I hope also remains is obviously there is a lot about how school is running and what's happening and what's working, what's not working, that you can glean by being in the building and being in the same space with teachers and scholars. And where in the absence of that, we've had to, out of necessity, look a lot more at the data to understand just the mechanics and the reality of what's happening on a day-to-day basis at our schools, right? And so I think that that's something where, again, a lot of the data that we can look at isn't going to go away, right? It's just a matter of how, what's our motivation to dive deep into some of the sorts of metrics that we've had to rely on in the distance learning environment that are still informative metrics, even if kids are going back to school, about how well they're doing, about things like family engagement and how that might be kind of adapting, about what scholars are choosing to engage with, about what sorts of digital tools work and don't work. And I think that my hope is that we can continue to kind of be really interested in those sorts of indicators, even though we're going to have, hopefully, obviously, at some point, be able to come back to a conventional school environment, but not necessarily forget how much we can really learn just by looking at the data that we have, through many of these tools that we've kind of gotten to know much better in the last few months.
Yeah. So it's really those connections, that connection making, the data piece. Great. Ernie, anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, I'm hoping that we're able to, we weren't one-to-one before the pandemic, and now that we are, we're looking to leverage our virtual infrastructure while in the classroom, to use technology while in the classroom. So it's important for us to not only should we have to pivot back to a virtual environment, it will be less of a disruption for staff and scholars, but also to grow the technology in the classroom, to use technology like leverage smart boards where you can cast scholar devices right onto the smart board and allow teachers to teach in conjunction. And we'll be doing this in collaboration with our academic team so that they can then build curriculum using smart boards and really use this opportunity to take technology to the next level while in our schools. I think that we were evaluating a classroom technology right before the pandemic, and I think that kind of just put it right, just put it right in our feet now to just continue to move forward and leverage technology in a different way.
It's really coupling, Kofi, you kind of mentioned this, retaining this growth mindset, right? As we shift back, how do we maintain this growth mindset and continue to move forward? And like thinking about those connections and all the different ways those are being made between families and teachers and students. And Ernie, to your point, between the technology teams and the academic teams, right? That have now, if they haven't already been working together, are now, right? It's critical more than ever that they are. Thank you so much. That was the list of my questions. So we're gonna shift now to Q&A from our audience. And so we're actually going to ask Zachary D to go ahead and unmute yourself, and you can ask your question directly to our panelists. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for letting me ask my question, Matt. So my question is regarding our earlier students, our younger students in technology proficiency. We've often found here at KIPP Columbus that our little people struggle with technological proficiency, especially like our 5 and younger students. How are you guys navigating that?
Well, at KIPP Atlanta, we're using Clever so that since they're not as familiar with logging on, so single sign-on, and we're also leveraging touch technology on our Chromebooks to facilitate their use of those devices as well. And of course, the academic team and the teachers select content appropriate software, for their learning as well.
Yeah, one of the things that I think, and this is definitely a challenge. I think one of the things that we did strategically was think about who are the best folks to provide technology support to that group of people. And I think we made a decision that like the teacher should be really the main point of contact, the trusted advisor when it comes to those sort of technological issues. So we've kind of set that up as an expectation, especially at that age group, for the teacher to be extra attentive to when folks have challenges, to communicate explicitly that they should be kind of seen as a resource for non-instructional sorts of things that might come up where they need assistance. And then obviously, like we have work to do to make sure that our teachers are equipped to provide that level of support. But we thought that just making sure that's the right person that's providing the help was going to make a big difference, and having it be the teachers that they trust and that they see every day, to the extent possible, be the folks who provide that help, I think has been part of what's made that less of a challenge, at least in our environment.
Pretty much echoing what both Ernie and Kofi had said, I think the teachers have truly been creative and amazing. What we did was identify a power user at each campus for each EdTech tool, and then they created videos and screen grabs and how-tos that we then posted on our website or shared in Google Classroom. So this way, both if the younger students couldn't see them, the families can. Then additional tactics we did is we do have some open office tech hours with our director of technology that we just have that available should a parent want to join and ask some questions, and also be available to the teachers to do that. But I cannot agree more that we need to empower the users and the teachers to be the ones helping out our younger scholars.
Hear, hear. Well said, everyone. This brings us to the end. Thank you so much, panelists. So I have so much gratitude for spending your Monday afternoons with us here and for sharing your great insights and knowledge. Thank you to all the attendees for joining. I'm going to hand it back over to Lars to do a quick closing for us. So thank you again, everyone. Really appreciate you and all the work that you're doing.
I was muted. Typical Zoom problem, right? Thanks, Matthew, and a big thank you to Kofi, Ernie, and Michelle for bringing your experiences, your humility, and your excellence today. I think we've all learned a lot from things you've shared. Thank you to all of our attendees who joined us today. We hope this was really valuable for you. If you have any feedback, please feel free to email me directly at lars@inspiroz.com.